The first topic of tonight is the BBC banned staff members from attending Pride, something that has received quite a bit of coverage recently, for very good reason. So, this whole thing the whole story broke out when iNews, specifically journalist Benjamin Butterworth, ran a story titled BBC staff told attending LGBT Pride protests in any capacity can breach new impartiality rules. Now, the rules in general are highly conservative. If you don't know, the BBC has become more and more conservative over the past decade or so. It was already pretty conservative to begin with, but it's got far worse recently. Specifically when it comes to trans issues, it's become quite heinous in the way and the coverage that it has, etc. So this sort of move doesn't surprise us. But yes, the story broke about new impartiality guidelines, which stated that BBC staff members, specifically those in the field of news reporting, were not allowed to attend any protests which may violate their impartiality. Now, this led to concerns by staff members about Pride, because Pride is a protest. So a bunch of staff members asked, is it okay to go to Pride? What exactly counts as a protest versus a celebratory thing? And the responses ranged quite a bit. Someone was told explicitly on the phone that they were not allowed to attend Manchester Pride. Another individual was told that it became a protest if there were trans issues involved, which became a focal point of a lot of the Twitter activity and the people criticizing the new policies. So the whole thing really just blew up from there, and people were really concerned about the state of queer members of staff at the BBC. The facts that this seemed to be a move that effectively legislated them into hiding, or that they couldn't, defend their existence, really. And this is not the only thing that has happened at the time. At the same time, the BBC has also been caught posting, responses, balancing the issue on any LGBT plus positive article it has, in which they have invited a vocal transphobe to have their say on any trans positive article. So the whole thing has just thrown the BBC into sort of disarray over this whole issue, with members of staff confused as to what exactly the policy does and does not include. Unsurprisingly, what was his name? BBC director Tim Davies went out to clarify the issue in an email which was shared to Twitter by Scott Bryan, stating that, quote, "Dear all, thank you all for your support in rolling out the editorial guidance on impartiality yesterday. This new guidance and the rules around social media activity are significant steps in renewing our commitment to impartiality and securing the trust our audience have in us. There is one specific issue I want to make sure that there is no room for misinterpretation following inaccurate commentary and some feedback from staff, which is the ability to participate in Pride parades. There is no ban on attending Pride parades. The guidance that we published yesterday made it very clear that staff outside of news and current affairs and factual journalism may attend marches, demonstrations, and protests as private individuals. I have copied below the relevant extract of the guidance for reference." Now this is where it gets interesting. There are different considerations for staff who work in news and current affairs and factual journalism, and senior leaders. But I want to be clear, there is no issue for these staff attending community events that are clearly celebratory and commemorative, and do not compromise perceptions of their impartiality. If news and current affairs staff are participating in such events, they must be mindful of ensuring that they do not get involved in matters which could be deemed political or controversial. There is no ban on these staff attending Pride events. Attending Pride parades is possible within the guidelines, but due care needs to be given to the guidance, and staff need to ensure that they are not seen to be taking a stand on politicised or controversial issues. Protecting the BBC's impartiality is the core of everything we do. We must ensure that we avoid doing anything that endangers audience perceptions of the BBC's impartiality, and protect the ability of staff in news and current affairs to report fairly and impartially. Sorry, this is getting me quite a bit. Do drop me a line if you have any questions about this, or speak to your manager. This right here, that little bit where it starts getting interesting, like, okay, it's not a general ban on staff, but when it comes to the news team and the factual reporting, etc., there is a ban there. A big part of it to explain is the fact that Pride is political. It's inherently political. At best, what this says is Tim Davies has no idea about what Pride is. That's being generous to him. At best, this says that he thinks Pride is just this parade, a sort of Mardi Gras sort of thing. That's not the case. Bisexual people face extreme levels of domestic violence, intimate partner violence. Gay people are still being assaulted in the streets. Trans people are having their very existence challenged day in, day out. You know, equality wasn't won with marriage equality. So Pride is inherently political. What's more is who sets the guidelines for what is politicized and what isn't. Again, staff who asked to clarify this were told that trans issues are politicized, and therefore if they attend an event which discusses trans issues, which LGBT plus Pride is going to do, there's a reason there's a T in there, that's a problem. What this has effectively done is drag the staff at the BBC back to a time where you could be fired if you were found to be a member of the LGBT plus community. Because now they have to wonder, instead of just being, okay, if I go to this Pride event, will I be recognised by someone and it gets back to my boss and I'm fired? It's a case of, okay, if I go to this event, will someone report it as being partial? Will they press it that I was there, I was protesting, that it violates my impartiality, etc.? So they're effectively forced out of the Pride sphere because there is no clear guidance. The whole, oh, you can attend so long as it's not political, that it's celebratory and commemorative, that's more of a threat than anything. It reminds me a lot of those bullies who tell you to go ahead and do something, and you can tell from the smile that they have on their face that the moment you do something, they're going to turn that around and hurt you. Like, if I was working at the BBC, I don't know what I'd do. Like, would I go ahead and just, avoid Pride in general, because there's always a chance that someone might see me, someone might recognize me, someone might report me as being partial. Because that's the thing, it is so open to interpretation that this allows for an incredible amount of abuse of power. So yes, those people have effectively been told, if you go to Pride, you could very well lose your job. So it may not be a strict ban of, you can't attend Pride, but in practicality, effectively, it is a ban. I don't know if you have anything to add, Levi.
Oh, I have things to add. Yes, I have things to add. This scares me, not just because of the current issues that have just been laid out, but also I keep thinking about the logic behind these impartiality guidelines, and there are wider implications which really scare me. You think about, why is it that you're not allowed to go to Pride events that have, trans issues being included in them? It's because trans people, our very existence is extremely contentious right now. If I say I have a non-binary friend, to a lot of people, that's this horrible political statement. Oh, how dare you say non-binary people exist? And it makes me think, not only does this mean that people who work for the BBC can't go to Pride? But how could a trans person work for the BBC? You say, Ethel, oh, if I worked for the BBC, and I'm thinking, but could you even work for the BBC? Because your very existence is contentious to a huge portion of their audience. They're going to be really offended.
It is going to freeze them out. I was talking more about the people who already worked in the BBC. Those that have survived years of terrible takes of inviting ignorant, washed-up comedians on for their shit takes and pretending that is impartiality.
Yeah. Well, see, it goes beyond trans people. What about cis queer people as well? Their existence is contentious. I worry about the implications for BIPOC, for neurodivergent people, disabled people, even women, anyone whose existence or basic rights are even remotely contentious. Because reading through these guidelines, it was very clear to me the issue here was not it wasn't about impartiality. It was about pandering, about being milquetoast and inoffensive and living up to the status quo. They are not interested in trying not to enforce any particular viewpoint. They are interested in violently holding to the status quo because that is inoffensive to the majority of people.
To steal from Terry Pratchett, this is no longer news. This is old. This is about reinforcing what you've always known about, the trans community, etc. It's the same with Tim Davies, again, as the one who's come under flack for the stories being balanced with some random transphobe commentator.
This is highlighted brilliantly by... did we discuss the poppies yet?
We haven't discussed the poppies. We are going to go on to discuss the poppies in a second. Because I was going to say, you mentioned people of colour, and yes, that will come up in a second. So
this is... I was going to go on to the poppies. So do you want me to explain the poppies, or do you want to explain the poppies?
Well, first of all, we need to discuss how the poppies came up.
Go on then.
And that is with Femi Uluwal questioned the BBC's impartiality on the grounds that whilst the policy very specifically uses the fascist it's not really a dog whistle, it's more of a buzzword at this point, the fascist buzzword virtue signalling, as what you need to avoid is virtue signalling. They were pointing out, how come the BBC enforces all of its presenters to wear poppies during Remembrance Month? And how come that's seen as impartiality, but any other politics like Black Lives Matter, which was their main one, and they did mention the LGBT plus community, how come these are political and conscientious? Sadly for Femi, this resulted in him receiving an extortionate amount of abuse on Twitter. There is a lot of nationalism in the UK poppy sphere. There's a lot of white nationalists, and if you question anything about standards, etc., and how they're framed, they will seek you out. It's kind of like it's kind of like British exceptionalism. If you've been to America and you've seen American exceptionalism, and anytime you criticize America as a country and people get really defensive about it, in the UK, poppies have the same sort of sacred appeal.
Doesn't that make them basically a white supremacist symbol?
We'll come back to that in a second. We'll come back to that in a second. However, Femi was then invited onto a morning show to discuss the issue. And the thing is that they wore a poppy when they went on. They said the poppy isn't the issue. The issue I have is the fact that the BBC is pushing its presenters to wear this one symbol to show their virtues, to virtue signal, if you will. But when it comes to Black Lives Matter and queer issues, suddenly that's an issue. And he says, isn't that partiality? You're showing that one of these political symbols is fine, but the other two, which are about people existing, that's up for debate. And if you go, the last link we actually have in this section of the story is actually a link to a post by Femi, which has clips from the show. And he just stands there as this vocal bigot. Cal Malone just goes on and on about the facts that poppies are not at all political. How can you say that? To which he responds, okay, well, why is the statement that Black Lives Matter any more political then? And she goes, well, it's not. But people view that as conscientious. Why? And he just runs circles around her as she even says, when I wear a poppy, I am telling people. So you're making a statement. No, 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 I'm not making a statement, but you just said I'm telling people. And all of this just sort of came to a point where it's just like, it just shows that the BBC is not doing this because they actually care about impartiality. If they did that, they would have stopped inviting uninformed, washed-up hack comedians on to talk about a medical issue, specifically in relation to the medicalization of trans children. They wouldn't have done that.
It does make me laugh, actually, how they're like, oh, for factual journalism, we have these special standards, and this factual journalism doesn't seem to have a lot of facts. That's the one thing I'd expect them to adhere to, is facts, and they don't seem to want to do that, do they?
But the thing is, the whole lie behind this is the idea that the poppies are not political. Go to the mainland UK, they're accepted. You know, in Great Britain, they're typically accepted. Go to Northern Ireland, however, and they are very political. In Northern Ireland, for those who don't know, due to the violence in the Troubles in which British soldiers shot and murdered civilians, the poppy has become associated with that, specifically with nationalist groups. So wearing a poppy is political, and that is why they have petitioned the BBC in the past for forcing its presenters to wear them, because they see it as a violation of impartiality when covering Irish news. So it's amazing that this is the one that they sort of go to, oh, well, it's not a big issue. And it's like, talk to someone who is in a country that the UK has invaded, that has bombed, etc. It changes. Of course, those of us who have grown up in a society where we've been constantly indoctrinated into the idea that the poppy is this virtuous symbol, lest we forget, you know, of course, people who have been raised in that sort of society their entire life are going to have a positive perception of it compared to Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter, etc. Of course they are. But that's the thing. That's a lie. You know, the poppy has never been lest we forget. It's always been lest we remember. Lest we remember the facts that the millions of people who died in the fields on the continent died not out of some glorious great war. They died as a victim of colonial brutality. That is why the First World War happened. Colonial friction between various different countries that had powers all around the world. That's why it happened. That's why they died. It wasn't virtuous, it wasn't great, but we've become so wrapped up in the idea of this poppy that the language we use to refer to it, the poppy has become so detached from the horror of the war that it used to once represent. And that has just allowed white nationalist groups, etc., to come in and just seize upon it and just use it to propagate their narratives. There's a reason people use the white poppy when they complain about migrants coming here. You know, oh, we have veterans on the street, we can't take migrants, you know. There's a reason they turn to that. It's not an actual care for those veterans, because, by the way, I should note, my criticism of the poppy and how it's become institutionally is not a criticism of the soldier. The soldier's a victim in all of this. They're a victim of a system that has taught them to hate people across sea for no fucking reason, to bomb their homes, etc. Many of them suffer PTSD as a result, and they're just abandoned by the government. I came from Aldershot. That's where I've lived the last few years, and there are quite a few homeless veterans out there, totally abandoned by the government. So it's kind of disgusting then to see the idea that, oh, it's a pure symbol that nobody can disagree with, no one could criticize, and it's like that just doesn't hold up in the slightest. I'm sorry, that was a big rant. I had a lot to say on that. I don't know if you have anything to add. Did I?
I got distracted for a second by my friend showing up. I'm
I
sorry.
see.
I'm so professional.
That's fine. But yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I would love to add some things to the thing about everything you said about the poppies, but I mean, you covered it really well. I could do a whole soliloquy about how I'm disillusioned with the Anzac things here. I guess the one thing I will say is I've always felt, ever since I was a child, I've always felt like reverence for things like the poppy and Anzac Day, which is also a World War One thing. I felt like we are told that we're supposed to remember the horrors of war so they never happen again. But what we're actually taught is to have reverence for soldiers in the military and to not actually learn anything about war is like or what war is like or why it happens. And, I suspect the reason they do that is because teaching you that war is horrible and bad and you should never do it is a very bad way to have new soldiers. Very bad way to get new soldiers.
I mean, like the whole reason Britain really got involved with this First World War, yes, everything was triggered by the assassination, but Germany had been trying to copy Britain in a lot of its things. Like, we built the dreadnought and they copied us. Germany was getting rather agitated about the fact that in Africa their territories were mostly along the Saharan band compared to the UK, which had the luxurious areas. So Britain kind of used the First World War as a way to put Germany in its place because it was trying to grow. So again, and I say this, like Sergeant Stonehouse, Sergeant John Stonehouse was my great grandfather, died at the River Somme, got blown up. He lost his leg first, then he got taken onto a stretcher, and then the stretcher bearers and him were again hit by another shell, and that was the last any of them were seen. Like, this is not something I say completely ignorant of my history, of my past. They didn't need to die. There was no fucking good reason for them to die. And we can't also deny the fact that what happened in the First World War created the environment in Germany that then allowed the repeated coup to happen, because there was coup after coup, the left wing seized, the right wing seized, and then who came along? Well, a rather nasty individual by the name of Adolf Hitler. It set the ground for the Second World War. It allowed him to talk about the glory days of, before the First World War, and how, the country has been disgraced, we've been stripped of our military, these outsiders have come in, they've dictated us, like, we are lesser than them, we should all rise up. That's what we created through the First World War. We can't deny that fact. So, yeah.
Yeah, Poppy's very political. Much more political than trans people should be.
Yeah. But that's not the convenient narrative for the BBC, because, again, the people in the BBC has been getting more conservative, and the Conservatives love war, so they love the shield that the poppy acts as, because, again, anytime you criticise war, this is something we see in America as well, it's seen as criticising the soldiers. Oh, you can't dare say anything about the unjust atrocity which is creating the refugee crisis, which the very same people who defend the war then cry about the refugee crisis. You can't say anything about that.
It's more than that, though.
We have a $5 super chat. When they talk horrors of war, they focus on soldiers and make them heroes. They shy away from civilians, especially in the war zone. That is true. That's actually something I thought of, I was meant to talk about, but I forgot. Because, yes, war, of course, drains all sorts of resources. And, again, innocent lives are lost. Every war that is created drains us from resources that we could be using to tackle other things, like poverty and climate change. Because, yes, it's just, Oh, it's really depressing. I'm sorry. More from Peterborough. Isn't it strange that World War One and World War Two aren't brought up, including colonial horrors? Like, seriously, never heard much about India in World War Two until recently. Yes, I've been doing some research about this specifically in Bengal, because Adita's Bengali. Adita's my wife, for those who don't know. For those who don't know, several million Bengalis were starved as a direct consequence of Winston Churchill's policy. Um, like, and all of the excuses given are such horrific lies. Like, people say, oh, Bengal was on the front line. Okay, there was a stretch to the south of Bengal that was on the front line, but it isn't actually on the major front line. Most of the land front line is of a different place, because it's actually the part that Japan actually tried invading. It was the Battle of Imphal. Manipur, the state of Manipur. Manipur is mostly in front of Bengal. It's like an entire state in front of it. So Bengal wasn't in the front line except for the small bit down south. Yes, it had the coast, but by that logic, Britain was also the front line. And should also, be denied its food and policy. There's also ignored the facts that the merchant fleet was bringing food from Australia via India and then to Britain to build up the grain reserves, because we were expecting the war to continue for another couple of years, and we were just building up massive grain reserves, which we never used during the war. So there was that. There's the facts that the famine was predicted a couple of years beforehand, and Churchill continued to exploit, continued to take rice and other resources out of India right up to that point. Only when the famine got so bad did he finally stop doing it. There's also the facts that various allies attempted to send India food aid, including Canada. I know Canada attempted to do so. There was one of the chancellors involved who actually wrote about this in his diary, and the facts that they approached him at like a meeting, and then he got on the line and told Churchill, and Churchill went straight there and made sure that no, that food was redirected to Europe. It was like the ship was ready to go in the dock, and he redirected it back to Europe. And as a result, several million Bengalis died. And this is for a nation that supplied 2 million soldiers to the Second World War. They fought in every major theatre. They fought the Japanese, they fought the Nazis in Africa. They also helped liberate Italy and various other European countries, while the Mediterranean. They were in every major theatre, and we slaughtered several million of them for no justifiable reason. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. That was quite a bit of a tangent.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. I got a couple things to mention, but first, you know more about history than me. I'm not sure if peace love needs to be hidden or not.
Oh, so what?
In the chat, peace love. What they've said.
They do talk about it.
It seems iffy to me. I'm not sure.
Let's remove it for now, because yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just going back to when you said that, of course, conservatives love war, and because how dare you criticize the country? They also just love like mass murder, basically. I'm reminded of H-Bomb's 2017 election watch video, where he's like, will you kill millions, Jeremy? Will you kill millions? I'd love to vote for you, but, as a Tory voter, I can't remember the whole bit, I'm sorry. But yeah, he basically summarized that a bunch of people were basically begging Jeremy Corbyn to say that he would bomb people unnecessarily. For no reason. Yeah. Huge tangent. It is very tempting to just sit here and listen to you talk about history for it genuinely is. But
again, we cannot pretend that the First or even Second World War was this glorious crusade. We did not attack Germany to save people from the concentration camps. We had reports far longer and we knew everything was going on, and we didn't do anything. So it was not a noble cause to save the Jews from the concentration camps. It was just to fight back against Germany again, put Germany back in its place. Oh, they did a terrible thing. Let's spin ourselves as the glorious people who liberated everything. Forget the fact that we took the pink triangles, which were the trans and gay people from those concentration camps, and put them back in prison. It's just like if you go to my Facebook profile, there's actually a banner which I made, which had a poppy, I think in like 2011. Like, I used to, because again, all of my family, my history, like, they've been military, and I've lost family in the First World War, and I've had family fight in the Second World War. I've known all this. There was that connection there, but over the years, it's just become more and more disillusioned about the fact of what's actually happened. On Duck Assault, America didn't care about the Jews. Yeah, the same for the UK. I mean, the Conservatives erected a statue to a vocal fucking Nazi, and no one said a thing. And it's quite clearly absolute bullshit. Anyway, I think we kind of mined that topic. Again, the whole thing of poppies not being political, absolute boulder dash. They are incredibly political. It is incredibly hurtful to many groups that have been personally hurt by the British military. So when you say poppies are okay, but Black Lives Matter and trans people, which, by the way, unlike poppies, which are like soldiers and veterans, okay, they're soldiers. I get that they're indoctrinated by a system, but they still have hurt people. They are still, many of them are still guilty of various war crimes, etc. Trans
and they did
and black
technically
people,
choose to be soldiers.
They did choose to be soldiers.
You cannot be a soldier. You can't, if you're trans or black, you can't just not be that.
There is a degree of choice involved. I'm not completely washing their hands of it. I am saying, however, there is a system involved that does pressure people, especially in places like America, where it's like, if you want education, go to war. But the thing
I'm not saying that soldiers...
I just want to finish the point anyway. I just want to get around to finish the point. The whole point is, black and trans people, the political nature of what's being discussed is their very existence. They've done absolutely nothing violent. Their existence is being debated. That's the difference here. Like, if there was any sort of justice in the world, black and trans lives would not be seen as political. The poppy would be questionable. If it was any way around. That's my personal perspective. I know Femi disagreed. Femi is I believe in what the poppy is. I believe it is good for raising money for veterans, etc. Which questions just how much the Conservative government actually cares about veterans if they have to raise money for it. Why isn't the government taking care of the people it exploits for war? So, yeah.
Okay, Jamie J does make a good point about conscription.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still not on this. It's not no one is born a soldier.
No one's born a soldier.
And my heart does go out to people who are conscripted. But it's not
again,
the same. It's still not the same thing.
People coming from poor backgrounds in places like America, you want to go to college. Well, here's a way to do it. Fight for us. I studied alongside Jamie. She was she was someone who was involved with the wars in the Middle East. And she had just got her ability to I can study wherever I want. I will study in the UK, and that's how I met her. She was an American. So yeah. Anyway, we should probably move on to the next topic.
One thing I did want to say quickly about the BBC is reading their social media guidelines. It did also kind of scare me just because of how draconian they are. Even if you're posting in a private group or you've locked down your personal account, you have to apply the same standards as if you're posting publicly. There's no difference between an official account and a personal account. Saying that this isn't the BBC's perspective doesn't protect you. Assume anything you're posting will be viewed critically. None of that sounds healthy. It sounds like if you work for the BBC, they own you and you're always on the job, and that really that scares me. It just does not seem healthy at all for anyone working for them.
Ooh, we've had a
Uh,
£20 donation from the gaming archaeologist. Keep up the good work, Ethel. I never realised how much history was left out, especially the pink triangles. My grandfather was part of the Polish Second Corps. That's thank you for that. That's very much appreciated. Hopefully, we inform. I actually started a video on the Bengal famine, which is why I know so much, but I never quite found the right tone for it, and I'm wondering if that's because of I'm a white person. Um, but like, we can't underestimate like just how hurtful a lot of the stuff can be, painful it can be. For example, one thing I've noticed a lot about British television is the fact that there's a lot of like time traveling stuff, and there's a lot of time traveling stuff that shows Churchill because they're quite an iconic figure, and a lot of them has been whitewashed as well. And it's like living with a Bengali and seeing how she reacts, how she tenses up every time she sees them presented in a purely positive like leadership role. It's quite telling just how much cross generational scarring has been caused by events like the Bengal famine.